Hi everyone, Toothany Much Tano here. The internet's too much music, too much. And it's time for a review of the new Jesca Hoop album, Memories Are Now. Jesca Hoop is an American-born singer-songwriter who has been at it for a while now. She just pretty much hit a milestone with it being 10 years since the release of her official debut album, Kismet. And reading into her back history, because truth be told, I didn't really know that much about her going into this album, I guess she was put on by the one and the only Mr. Tom Waits, one of my favorite songwriters walking the planet. I guess he and his wife helped grow her career, which is pretty funny because I can hear his influence creeping in a little bit on this album, especially in some of the rickety and rootsy folk tunes with very raw and noisy recordings. This album, genre-wise, stylistically, and if you go back into Hoop's discography, you're going to catch elements of folk music and rock music with kind of an experimental edge. You can also catch some punchy electronic beats with kind of a pop appeal to them on the album The House That Jack Built. Or on her debut album Kismet, there's just some lavishly arranged Baroque instrumentation surrounding a lot of those tracks. And Hoop also has her share of stripped-back acoustic cuts too. Now, this is Hoop's first solo effort on the Sub Pop Records label, following up 2016's collaborative album with Iron and Wine's Sam Beam, which actually slipped under my radar somehow. But listening back to her older music, her new album over here certainly stands out in her discography as her most stark and bare bones effort yet. It's cut down, it's stripped down, it's everything you need, nothing you don't, the barest of essentials. Most of the songs on this thing consist mostly of just Hoop's voice with some added vocal harmonies, usually tracked by herself, I think, at least it sounds like her voice, and just some guitar. Maybe a little sparse percussion here and there. But I don't want to just label this as some kind of just another folk album, because it's certainly not that. It's not just another songwriter's acoustic indulgence going on here. This is actually a very texturally satisfying record, despite how little sound is going into it, with the distant drums and the way that the vocals have been recorded, so it sounds like some are very up close, up front, others are sort of happening in the distance. A lot of the guitar tones on this thing are dirty, they're blemished, they're distorted, they're beautifully flawed. This album has not been gussied up to sound super clean. Really the opposite as songs like Unsaid and Cut Connection. It seems like Jesca and her producer do all that they can to add as much filth into the mix as possible, and this is not surprising considering that she's working with Blake Mills on this album, and his production credits, the people who rank among his production credits, people like Fiona Apple, Connor Oberst, Alabama Shakes, and Laura Marling. Hoop delivers a very nice variety of sounds on this record. We have the very minimal title track, Memories Are Now, that kicks the entire record off. Most of the song is anchored by these steady, thudding, bassy notes that are coming from, I don't know, a muted guitar or baritone guitar, bass, I'm not entirely sure, but these rough gung, 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 just very deep and very patient root notes are a rock-solid foundation for the wonderful vocal acrobatics that Hoop does on top of them. And I like the lyrics of the song too, as Hoop is singing about sort of kicking somebody out of her life, go find someone else's life to ruin, telling this person to get moving. And this segues really nicely into the very chilly and close vocal harmonies on the second track, which are propelled by these persistent, plucked acoustic guitars. Things take a somewhat rootsier turn on the song Animal Kingdom Chaotic, which features a lot of hypnotic vocal refrains and guitar licks and rhythms. It's almost like a chant of a folk tune in a way, because it's so cyclical. It just kind of puts me in a inescapable kind of endless loop state. It's a decent tune, but I feel like this track sort of exists to provide this bridge where Hoop can just kind of dive into the even rootsier and wilder Simon Says, which has this kind of really dirty recording, really distant recording, maybe the most lo-fi recording on the entire record. It has kind of a backwater folk feel to it, and I love how in the lyrics Hoop starts talking about more modern things despite the fact that the song sounds so old and archaic. A standout lyric on the record to me, WWW, don't forget about life before the internet, going on to talk about our pixelated generation. I love when an artist doesn't use older sounds as kind of a refuge to get away from the modern world, instead comment on it, engage with it. The song Cut Connection is the middle point of the record and seems to bring some of the smoother, cleaner, chillier sounds at the very start of the record together with these rootsier, noisier recordings, folkier sounds that she was introducing deeper into the album. Distant drums, distorted guitars, and background vocals that sound like they were all recorded at once all kind of bleed into each other in a very chant-like state. Again, we're sort of hit with this moment where they're putting together this really linear moment in the song where things just kind of loop and loop and loop and kind of hypnotically collide into each other, creating this really primal kind of cerebral experience. It's kind of this weird lo-fi echoey folk rock that reminds me quite a bit of some of the recordings PJ Harvey has put together on her 2 recent records. Hoop turns the clock back even further on songs of old, like maybe a few hundred years, as this track has like this Baroque folk quality to it, with just this archaic chord progression and a very whimsical vocal melody. I'm not really sure if it complements the indie folk and the country twang sounds that we've heard thus far on the record, but I can't deny that Hoop does this sound just as much justice as she's done almost every other sound thus far on the record, as the track is pretty much stunningly beautiful from the harmonized chorus vocals to the subtly arranged instrumentation hanging in the background. There isn't really a strong sonic thread pulling every single one of these songs together on this album, but it's really more the tunes than the sound that makes this album compelling as a whole. Case in point, the song Pegasi, which features a chord progression so beautiful and warm that the track doesn't really need anything else other than Hoop's vocals and some finger-picked guitar to sort of carry the track. So when there's a beautiful burst of arranged instrumentation kind of swelling toward the middle point of the track and kind of complementing the rest of the song throughout, it's just an added bonus. I'm not quite as convinced by the dodgy demeanor and the sort of loose pacing of the closing track, The Coming, but this is definitely one of the saddest songs on the entire record. Hoop definitely finishes this album off in a very dismal display, and I'm still left kind of wanting more. You know, this is 9 tracks, it's 40 minutes, it is satisfying on the whole, but I'm really curious as to see where Jesca Hoop goes from here, because I love this record. I think there are a lot of great things about this album, and what's so weird is even though this is far from being Jesca Hoop's first album, I feel almost like I'm recommending a new songwriter here to everybody, because going back and listening to her records, it's like she reinvents herself almost completely with every new album. So listening to this, even if this is your first album with her, it's kind of like listening to a songwriter artistically reborn in a way. And no matter where she moves stylistically, at the core of what she's doing, especially on this album, because this album is very much the core, because there's not a whole lot of bells and whistles, there's not a lot surrounding these tracks. At the core of what she's doing, she's bringing great songs, she's bringing quality lyrics, she's bringing tasteful instrumentation, she's bringing some good production. There's so many great things about this record. It is a little bit of a mixed bag, and there were a few tracks that felt somewhat redundant in my opinion, as they just kind of echoed the same country or the same indie folk vibe that many other tracks did, but still feeling a strong 7 to a light 8 on this thing. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't cry. Just get pissed off in the comments if you're pissed off. Okay? Okay? All right. Isn't that a good place to do it? Please. Links next to my head. Other videos. Subscribe to the channel. Official website too. Jesca Hoop. Or Jesca Hoop. I'm a moron forever.